Hi, I'm Diane McGarry with Drake at Arts. With me today are co-host Tom McGarry, potter Linda Fletcher, and ASL interpreter Connie. Linda has been making art since she was old enough to hold a box of crayons. I love them, especially Crayola crayons. They're the best. She started taking oil painting lessons when she was 8 years old, but in high school, she got her hands on clay for the first time and knew that this would be her chosen medium. 12 years later, she found the pottery studio in Nashua Center for the Arts and spent several years taking classes from various teachers there and eventually started teaching there as well. Soon after, she became the pottery teacher for Bishop Guertin High School, where she has been for 28 years. Congratulations, that's a nice longevity there. During this time at the Bishop Guertin High School, she attended the New Hampshire Institute for Art and earned a Bachelor's of Fine Arts degree. She continues to create in clay, working in her home studio in Manchester, New Hampshire. She has been a juried member of the League of New Hampshire Craftsmen and a longtime member of the New Hampshire Potters Guild, where she is currently the co-chair as well as part of the Education and Empty Bowls committees. Linda, please share your secrets with us about pottery and all this wonderful art you've been making through the years and inspiring in others.
Secrets. um, it's just there's something about the medium of clay that just the tactile experience, and I especially enjoy introducing it to students who have always felt that they had no creativity and didn't like art or didn't want, didn't think they could make art. And it's a totally different experience for them, rather than trying to draw something, it's just very hands-on. And so many of these young people discover that they really enjoy creating things. It's not, gets them off their computer screens
That's good.
or their phones nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, we've had people who do etching and they've got these very fine, um, fine, uh, what do you call those tools that they use to etch with? They're just very pointed and clear, and some paintbrushes have just a few bristles in them to do. But what you do with your hands is so much organic, and you really dig into the clay to make something.
Yeah. As a child, I loved playing in mud puddles, so maybe it came from there. And making mud pies, which I try to feed to the children on the street.
Try to feed them mud pies.
Yeah.
I love that. That's great.
Oh, doesn't this look pretty? Sprinkle some sand on the top for sugar. But yeah, so just making, having that in my hands was always something I enjoyed. Um, and I still like to draw and paint, but now I find I'm usually doing it on clay. So,
So
and I
talking about drawing and painting on clay, is that just for the glazes? Are you indenting or
yeah,
etching?
I do a lot of carving in my pottery. So before the clay has been fired, when it reaches a stage that's called leather hard, that is the magic time for me with the clay. You can carve, and you can put clay slip over it, colored slips, and then carve through those so you get a contrasting color. So it just, the possibilities just seem kind of endless. And then even after the clay has been fired on a smooth surface, you can still use a lot of the same materials to paint on them rather than just putting glaze over them. So it's called engobes, and they're basically clay in a liquid state that has colorants added to it. And you can use, depending on the formulation, you can use them quite often on clay before it's fired, but there's also ones that are formulated to use afterwards. And then if you want it to be shiny, you put a glaze over it.
Oh, do you fire it again after it's been?
Yes. Yeah. It has to be fired again.
So you can fire a pot numerous times.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm totally ignorant of this.
Traditionally, what most people do is they fire it once to a bisque when it has a still porous consistency. That's when, and then you glaze it and then you fire it again. But with some people especially people who do wood firings, which I do with the New Hampshire Potters Guild, Some of those pots go in there 3 or 4 times because you don't have a lot of control over what's happening in a wood-fired kiln because it's the ash that creates the glaze. And depending on where the pot is in the kiln, you may get a beautiful covering, a coating, or blushes from the fire. And other times, they're too shielded and they come out kind of blah. So they're going again the next time. And that does put a little bit of stress on the clay, and many of them break. But as artists, they just say, no, this isn't what I wanted, so I'm going to try it again.
Wow. That's right. I did know that they got fired twice, but I didn't remember. That's so fascinating that you can just keep on adding to the pot,
Mm-hmm.
the artwork, until you're satisfied with what you're trying to communicate.
Up to a point. I mean, the artwork itself is pretty limited. If you don't get that part right the first time, you're not going to be able to fix it again. But as far as the way the glaze responds, you can refire them. Or in some cases, when I've decided something I didn't put a glaze on because I thought I would like just the colors from the engoves, and I decided no, that was too dull looking, and then I would put glaze on them and fire them again. But if it's already got a glaze on it, there's not a lot you can do other than put it back in the kiln and hope that it'll do something different. And in a regular kiln, electric kiln, like what I traditionally, typically use, that isn't usually very helpful. But with a wood-fired kiln, it can make a whole world of difference to the pot just because of what goes on inside that kiln. The atmospheric firings is so much different than an electric kiln.
So it's
hotter, or which can be hotter, the electric or the wood fire?
The wood-fired kiln is hotter. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We get it up to hotter than we should sometimes. So especially when there are certain men leading the firing and they decide they want to see if we can't get cone 13 down, when usually you only go to cone 9, and the higher the number, the hotter the kiln is.
Is that scale specifically for pottery or just kind of a general?
Yeah, that's for pottery. Yes.
Go ahead, Trey.
Could you explain what cones are for those of us who have no idea?
A cone is basically a ceramic. It's called pyrometric cones, and they melt at certain temperatures, and they're kind of a triangular shape. And you put them in a kiln, in a wood-fired kiln. You have a cone pack where you place, I think it's usually 5, going from the lowest cone up to beyond the one that would be beyond where you want it to go. And you have them situated so that you open a peephole and you can see what's happening. And they're situated in different parts of the kiln. So you can monitor what's going on. And some parts will fire hotter than others. So you learn the kiln that way too, by putting those cone packs in different places.
Very cool.
I would think it also depends on what wood you put there to burn in the.
It does, yeah. So usually the kiln we have now, we mix up hardwood and pine. Some potters will use just pine, because it gets hot fast, but it burns really fast, and it's a lot of hard work because you can't stop stoking, and it burns up really fast. Because I've fired a kiln like that for a few years with an artist over in Wilton, New Hampshire, and that's what he used. John Baymore, he used pine, and that was very strenuous. You took a 20-hour shift,
Wow.
20-minute shift, because you were there constantly. Then somebody else would come over and give you a break from it because you were dealing with the heat, So, but with the way we're firing, the type of kiln we're firing there, it's not that rapid a response. You don't have to be there constantly putting wood in, because we will put pine in when we want it to get hot a little faster if we feel like it's slowing down, but we usually will put mostly hardwood and then just alternate with some pine every once in a while. So, and it makes a difference. The ash that's created from the different types of wood makes a difference into the results you get on the pots too.
So tell me about the ash. The ash gets on the pots?
The ash that is burned goes into the atmosphere, and comes down onto the pots, and the chemical reaction, there's calcium in the clay, the chemical reaction between the calcium in the clay and whatever the chemicals are there in that ash, create a glaze. And some glazes, people even make glazes out of ash. They'll take wood, ashes from their wood stove and sieve them and put them into glazes as well.
Are these glazes typically, I don't know, dull colors like gray and brown? Or?
They're very, very earthy. If you want bright colors, you don't do wood firing.
Okay.
A lot of brown. If you use a white clay or a porcelain clay or a white stoneware, you get much lighter colors. But typically, you can use glazes on the pots, and that does make a difference if you want a little bit more color on them. But it's one of those things that we try to educate the public to appreciate wood-fired pottery, because you're not going to get the pretty colors that a lot of people are looking for with pottery.
But you're going to get oranges and reds too, aren't you?
Sometimes.
But like almost fall leaf type.
No, not that bright.
Not even that bright. Okay.
No. If I've put some underglazes of the on-globes on pots that go into a wood kiln, and some of those colors will show, but much more muted than they would be if I did it in an electric kiln. You just don't get the real bright colors.
What is your favorite type of pot to make? What do you like to do?
Mostly I like making two things. Pinch pots, if I just want to sit and relax, I'll make them, and I do a lot of just like T-bowl shapes, and then I carve those. And I basically create some sort of design or pattern. I have one that usually it has to do with natural things, leaves and flowers and that sort of thing. And then coil building, where you build it up, and you end up doing a lot of the same things that you do with a pinch pot in terms of blending it and smoothing it out, except that you can make them a lot bigger than you can with just, starting out with a ball of clay. So I like both, and I carve on both of them. So if I want larger forms, I'll do it with coils, and then I'll smooth it out and carve that.
Do you throw on a wheel very much, or
very little? I don't really enjoy it. I can do it, and I do it to demonstrate for my students. And every once in a while, I'll just, some of you in my family will say, we really want some mugs, we really want some bowls. So in order to make a few of them quickly, I'll do it. But that's just, it doesn't have the same feeling for me. It's too mechanical. And the looks of the pots to me are not as pleasing.
I'm really going to have to think about this carving of pottery, because I've never thought about that before.
I don't know if you can see this, but probably can't.
Yes, I could, of course, when you were drinking before. Yes.
Yeah, that's a mug that I carved.
Wow.
And that's not a very deep one. There's some others that, especially if it's a bigger piece, I'll carve more deeply than that. But
did that start on a wheel, or did that start as a?
This one actually was made on the wheel. Yes.
And then you carved it out.
Yeah.
How neat.
Are there any new techniques that you're either exploring or considering exploring?
Kintsugi.
Okay. Please say what that is.
That is a Japanese technique of mending broken pots. So it's based in the aesthetic of wabi-sabi, which is finding beauty in imperfection and in aging things. And so I just watched something about the history of it a while ago, and it's kind of hearsay sort of history anyway, but the idea is to take and mend the pot that's broken with a resin, and then you paint it with gold. So the lines are emphasized with gold. And the practice now is to use a resin and blend it in with mica chips, or it can be a two-part epoxy, and you put mica chips into it and you can get a gold look, and then you just mend the pot. So I've just got, I have a lot of pots that go into the wood kiln break, and I've got one here now that has several large cracks in it, and I'm going to try to take it apart along those cracks and use the kintsugi for that. And I have some students at the high school who had some pots break, and they knew about kintsugi. When I told them that I had a kit to do it, they were all excited about trying it out. So just the idea of, taking something that you think you'd just throw away and turning it into even a more precious art piece.
Yes.
Not that we're using real gold, but
Well, good luck with that. It sounds like
yeah.
interesting and fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea that things are still worth something.
Yeah.
Even though they appear broken. And what is being broken? Isn't that a philosophical question?
Right. Yeah.
And what is old, as I sit here in my old age, quote unquote.
Yeah. Beauty and imperfection. That's the basic concept. So whatever you consider imperfection.
But we all have different ideas about what that is, don't we?
That's true. Yeah.
Do you teach classes out of, other than in the high school?
Not anymore. I have in the past, but it's been quite a few years since. I used to teach at the Nashua Center for the Arts. And that's actually where I was there when I met the person who hired me to teach at PG. She came in to take a class one summer because they had a potter's kiln that one of the brothers had it as a hobby. It's a Catholic school, so it's the Brothers of the Sacred Heart. And he had retired and gone to Rhode Island where they had their home for the older brothers. And she just didn't want that kiln to sit there. She said, we should have ceramics in our,
Yes.
as part of our art curriculum. And she was just developing an art curriculum, over the past few years. That was just, not too many years after they had merged with the girls' school. She had come from the Mount St. Mary's, where it was just girls, to teach over it. When they merged, she was the art teacher, and she started the art department. There was no art department at Bishop Guertin before then.
So you're part of the grassroots of the department there.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, she took that class and she said, I want a curriculum for this. So I helped her develop her curriculum, told her what supplies she would need. And then the next year she called me and says, the students love this. She says, but I really don't know what I'm doing. I only had one semester of ceramics in college and offered me the job. So that was
That's wonderful, Linda. Yeah. What a spark of inspiration for so many people too.
Yeah. It's been a good experience, and it's just the department has grown, in all aspects beyond pottery.
So from what you've said, your students normally have fun in your classes. Is that an accurate?
Sometimes too much fun, but
yeah. I do. Some people like the more athletic kids. I don't know. They also take this to satisfy an art requirement or something like that.
Yes, very often. That's a large percentage of my students, especially the males, are hockey players, football players.
And do any of them end up either pursuing pottery or some other artistic thing in addition to athletics?
Not to my knowledge. Actually, I take that back. I have, I heard from a student back a few years ago who had just finished in the Air Force Academy, and he was going to flight training school. Yeah. And there was a rec center there, and they had a potter's wheel, and they had a college student who was the teacher there. And he said it was the most relaxing thing he could have done. And his teacher also complimented him how much he knew about pottery.
Wow.
And then I ran, not even more recently, I ran into a woman who, when she saw I was at Bishop Guertin, I forget exactly how it came about, but she was a medical technician. And she said that, looking at my thing, says, oh, do you teach pottery there? Because she sort of recognized the name. I said, yeah. She goes, well, all three of my children took classes with you, and all three of them still do pottery.
Oh, that's great. Wow.
Yeah, I'd almost forgotten that until you mentioned it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So asking about athletes, when I was in high school, there was a guy, big, strong guy, football player. And one day, I don't know how it happened, but I ended up, at his house to visit. And he's also a metal sculptor. So
Mm.
don't assume that because somebody is, looks athletic that they don't do other
Oh,
pursuits.
yeah. I mean, to be a potter, you cannot be frail. You
Oh.
know?
You have to, every potter I know is very, very strong.
Yeah.
And actually just our daughter took pottery and art from Linda, and she minored in pottery in college and is still throwing pots and
She
making
is.
and stuff, and she loves it.
That's great.
Yeah.
2 days ago, Sunday, she was throwing pots.
Nice.
Yeah, it's not all wheel
I'm
though.
happy to hear that.
Making pots.
Yeah.
Thank you. She's sorry. She keeps on asking me what I want, and I have to think of things.
Yeah, and I even do some sculptural things. I mean, I had a lot of my larger pots are sculptural in nature, but they're still vessels. But a friend, I'd seen these metal birds that were supposed to be like garden ornaments. And I thought, I almost bought them. I was like, oh, but I could make those out of clay, rather than getting them from, this catalog. So I just played around. I made a couple of birds about, so big. And that was probably almost 10 years ago. And a friend was visiting me and saw them. They were in amongst my houseplants. And she just thought they were wonderful. She was actually one of my pottery teachers years ago. And she's the one who got me teaching, because she needed to, she was in the state legislature and she couldn't make it back in time to teach the children's afternoon classes. So she asked me to take those. And then the next thing I knew, she was calling me up and say, well, we're still in session, so can you take the adult classes? So that's actually how I started teaching, was from her needing someone to substitute for her. But anyway, she was visiting me and she goes, you should make a whole flock of those.
Oh, wow.
And each one is different. And I'm not trying to replicate any kind of bird. They're totally, I call them flights of fancy, And she told me 50, I did 25 in 1 year. I just said, okay, I've set myself this goal. So in 2023, I made 25 birds.
That's a lot.
And they're all different. Yeah.
That's a lot. I can imagine how they must be very beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, they're whimsical more than, yeah.
Well, but
Yeah.
there's no beauty in the whimsy.
Right.
And to see them in a garden would be really neat.
Yes.
Really neat.
It reminds me of the Chinese emperor's terracotta army, where face is different. I'm not sure if each body type is different, but they're very individual. Of course, he had a bunch because he was the emperor. He probably didn't make them himself. Yeah. How have you ever done like really big sculptural pottery?
The biggest thing I've made, I'm looking at it right now. I did it just last year. I went to a workshop at Watershed up in Maine, which is a ceramics center. And there was a woman there giving a class on how to make large sculptures when you only have a small kiln.
Oh,
that's what I was wondering.
Yeah. So it's made in 4 sections and they stack. I did it like a totem. They stack one on top of the other, and then how to, attach them together.
Very cool.
So it was part of the Potters Guild biennial exhibition that we just had a little while ago.
Yeah, the size of the kiln is definitely limiting, isn't it?
Yeah. And the biggest one prior to that was when I was taking classes at the New Hampshire Institute of Art, and my teacher challenged me to make a pot that would fill the kiln. And that was an arch type kiln. It wasn't an electric kiln. It was gas fired. So it was a little more spacious than what most of us deal with. So there were 5 or 6 other students in in the class, and they decided, well, they should get in on the act. So, but I had the biggest piece because mine was going in the center and had to reach up, as much as it could into the arch. So
Cool.
it was about, I think it ended up being about 40 inches tall.
I would guess that the bigger pieces, I'm not quite sure how to express this. Are they more prone to cracking or breaking apart or anything?
They can be, but it's all in how you, as long as you keep it even. If there are big discrepancies in the thickness,
Yeah.
that's when you're prone to getting cracks. If the thing, one part of the pot, dries and seals over more quickly in the kiln, then it creates an air. It's not even an air pocket. People think air pockets are what make pottery blow up. It's not. If it's too thick and the outer surface seals in the kiln before all the gases can escape from the inside, that's when you get the explosions.
Ah, wow. That's very cool. Thank you.
There's a lot of science to pottery, isn't there?
There is. I don't know that much of it, but let's just say I've learned it, over the years, but I certainly could not teach a chemistry class.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with us today, Linda. This has been great, really.
Thank you.
To see Linda's works, please join us for her art gallery during our January Art Saturday. Register on Eventbrite. And we'd also like to take a moment to thank all our generous sponsors for making these programs possible. If you'd like to be a donor, please email us at draketarts@gmail.com or go to our website, draketarts.com/donate. For more information about our Art Saturdays, also go to our website or email us. All of our programs are available on the Drake at Arts YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/@drakeatarts. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
In January.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.